My best friend confessed his love to me for the third time in a year, so I told him not to be a crumb collector, that I would never be with him. The problem is that 6 years later, he is the owner of a multinational company and I am a single mother of 3 children. Could it be that he still loves me? I have always known that I was born for the finer things in life, the kind of existence that doesn't require checking price tags or sitting in crowded waiting rooms. Back in university, I was the undisputed center of attention, the girl whose presence validated whatever room she walked into. Everyone knew my name, and everyone knew that I had standards that reached far above the mundane reality of the average student. Then there was Steven, a boy who trailed after me like a stray dog looking for a warm place to sleep. He was sweet, I suppose, in that beige, unremarkable way that people without pedigree often are. He didn't come from money, he didn't have the right connections, and his clothes always looked like they had been purchased at a clearance sale. We spent a lot of time together because I enjoyed having an audience, and Steven was a very dedicated one. He would listen to me talk about my dreams of marrying a diplomat or a high-end architect while he sipped on his cheap black coffee. He didn't seem to realize that my interest in him was purely charitable, a way to keep myself entertained between real dates with men who actually mattered. I allowed him to pay for my lunches occasionally because it gave him a sense of purpose, a small taste of what it felt like to be in the orbit of someone like me. He was useful for carrying my books and helping me with my more tedious assignments, acting as a sort of unpaid assistant. I honestly thought he understood the unspoken hierarchy of our friendship, but apparently, some people have no sense of self-awareness. That year, he developed this exhausting habit of trying to turn our arrangement into something meaningful and romantic. The first time he confessed his feelings, I laughed it off as a joke because I truly couldn't imagine him being serious about someone so far out of his league. The second time, I was a bit firmer, telling him that I valued our friendship but that I was looking for a partner who could actually offer me a lifestyle worth living. You would think a man with any dignity would have taken the hint and retreated into the shadows where he belonged. Instead, he decided to try a third time, right before graduation, cornering me in the library with this desperate, watery look in his eyes. He talked about growing together and building a future as if I were interested in a construction project rather than a finished masterpiece. I finally lost my patience because his persistence was starting to feel like an insult to my personal brand. I looked him dead in the eye and told him to stop being such a pathetic crumb collector, picking up the tiny scraps of my time and thinking they were a full meal. I made it very clear that a woman of my caliber and status would never settle for a mediocre nobody with 0 prospects and a bank account that couldn't even cover a decent dinner. I told him that I needed a man who was already at the top, not someone who was still trying to find the ladder. He looked like I had slapped him, which was exactly the wake-up call he needed to stop delusional thinking. I left him standing there because I had a flight to catch for a vacation with a real man, and I didn't look back once. The next few years were a series of unfortunate events that were honestly beyond my control and mostly the fault of the men I chose to trust. I married a man who claimed to be a developer, but he turned out to be a fraud who left me with a mountain of debt and 3 beautiful children who deserve better than this. It's not my fault that the economy shifted or that I was targeted by people who were jealous of my potential. I've had to move into a neighborhood that I wouldn't have even driven through 6 years ago, surrounded by people who have no sense of decorum. Every day is a struggle to maintain my dignity while dealing with the demands of 3 toddlers and a bank account that is perpetually in the red. I am still the same woman I was, but the world has become increasingly unfair to people of my natural standing. Now, here I am, sitting in the lobby of a building that looks like it was carved out of a single diamond, clutching a resume that has seen better days. The floors are polished marble, and the air smells like expensive cologne and success, a scent I haven't been near in far too long. The logo on the wall is a sleek, modern design that screams power and global dominance, and the name underneath it is Stevens. I saw his face on the cover of a business magazine at the grocery store last week, and I nearly dropped my coupons in shock. He's thinner now, sharper, wearing suits that probably cost more than my car, and he has this look of cold confidence that I find incredibly intriguing. It's funny how life works, bringing me right back to the one person who truly appreciated my value when I was at my peak. I'm not here to beg for a job like some common peasant, even though I technically applied for a position in the communications department. I am here because I realize now that Steven's success is likely a direct result of the motivation I gave him that day in the library. By being harsh, I pushed him to become the man he is today, and in a way, he owes his entire empire to my intervention. It's only right that I should be by his side to enjoy the fruits of the labor I inspired, especially now that I'm available again. I can already see us together, me acting as the elegant face of his company while he handles the boring technical details. A man doesn't just forget a woman like me, even if he has billions of dollars and a private jet to distract him. The receptionist is a young girl with a cheap haircut who keeps giving me suspicious looks as if I don't belong in these surroundings. She has no idea that I used to have people like her bringing me coffee every morning without me even having to ask. I've told her several times that I am a very close personal associate of the CEO, but she just keeps pointing to the plastic chairs in the corner. It's incredibly insulting to be kept waiting like this, especially when I know Steven would be horrified to see how I'm being treated. I've spent the last hour practicing my surprised to see you face in the reflection of my compact mirror, making sure I look approachable but still superior. I just need 5 minutes of his time to remind him of the spark we had and the future we were always meant to share. My children are currently with a neighbor I barely trust, and I can't stay here all day, but I won't leave until I've made my presence known. I'm wearing my last pair of designer heels, and even though they hurt my feet, they make me feel like the queen I am. I can imagine Steven walking through those glass doors, stopping in his tracks when he sees me, and realizing that his search for the perfect partner is finally over. He'll probably apologize for the crumb collector comment, realizing I was just testing his resolve, and will laugh about it over a vintage champagne. I've always been a visionary, and I can see our lives unfolding in a series of high-end galas and international travel. He just needs to see me, to remember the girl who was the prize of the university, and everything will fall back into its proper place. I'm sitting here, heart racing just a little bit, but I'm maintaining my composure because desperation is for the lower classes. I look at my wrinkled resume and realize it doesn't even matter what's written on it because my real value isn't on paper. Steven knows who I am, and he knows that I am the only person who can truly understand the weight of his current status. We are both elite now, him through his money and me through my inherent grace and history. This lobby is just a temporary waypoint before I am escorted up to the penthouse office where I belong. I just need to remind him of who I am, and the last 6 years will vanish like a bad dream. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "Let me get this straight. You called him the crumb collector and a mediocre nobody when he was down, and now that he's a billionaire, you're gracing him with your presence? You don't like Steven, you like his stock options and that marble lobby." OP's reply, "I was being realistic back then, which is a concept people like you clearly struggle with. I did him a massive favor by motivating him to actually achieve something instead of wallowing in his own mediocrity, and now I'm just here to see the results of my influence." Anonymous user 2 says, "The audacity is actually staggering. You're a single mom of 3 looking for a handout from a man you insulted to his core. Why on earth would a successful CEO want anything to do with someone who viewed him as beneath her until he got a paycheck?" OP's reply, "He was absolutely obsessed with me for years. A man's first true love is a permanent fixture in his mind regardless of his bank balance. I am the woman who shaped his ambition, and deep down, he knows that no amount of money can replace the history we share." Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and I must say, the lack of immediate gratification in this building is starting to become quite tiresome. I managed to talk my way past the first security filter by explaining to the receptionist that I was an old, very intimate friend of Steven's from his formative years. She looked at me with this judgmental squint, probably because my coat is a few seasons old and the stress of raising 3 children has left me looking a bit more haggard than I'd like. I told her that my current look was a choice, a sort of understated chic that people in her tax bracket wouldn't understand, but she just went back to typing. It's truly pathetic how little respect people have for personal history and status these days, especially in a company that prides itself on vision. Since I couldn't get a direct line to his office, I decided to take matters into my own hands and wrote a handwritten note on the back of my business card. A card I designed myself. I kept it elegant and mysterious, mentioning the good old times we shared at the university cafe and how much I've thought about our final conversation. I made sure to use my best calligraphy because presentation is everything, and I want him to remember that I haven't lost my touch. I handed it to a courier who was headed up to the executive floor, slipping him a few dollars that I really should have saved for milk. It's an investment in our future, and I'm sure once Steven sees my name, he'll drop whatever boring meeting he's in to come find me. I spent 4 hours in that lobby, which was an utter insult to my time and my standing as a mother of 3. I had to watch all these professionals scurrying around in their mid-range suits, looking like they were actually doing something important when we all know they're just cogs in Steven's machine. I deserve a position here that reflects my natural authority, perhaps something in public relations or even acting as his personal consultant. I know his mind better than anyone else in this building, and that kind of insight is something you can't learn in a business school. He's probably surrounded by men who don't understand his roots, and I am the only one who can keep him grounded while also elevating his image. The receptionist finally told me that the CEO was unavailable for the rest of the day and that I should leave my contact information with HR. I almost laughed in her face at the suggestion that I should be processed like some common applicant off the street. I told her that Stephen would be very disappointed to hear that his intimate friend was treated with such coldness, but she didn't even blink. It's clear that his staff needs a complete overhaul, and I'm already making a mental list of who should be fired once I take my rightful place. I left the building with my head held high, ignoring the stares of the security guards who were clearly intimidated by my aura. When I got home, the neighbor complained about the kids being too much to handle, as if my children aren't the most gifted individuals in this entire zip code. I told her she should be honored to spend time with them, but she just asked for the $20 I promised her for the extra hour. People are so incredibly transactional and small-minded, they can't see the big picture even when it's staring them in the face. I spent the evening looking at old photos of myself from university, reminding myself of the queen I am and the queen Stephen fell in love with. It's only a matter of time before he calls, and I need to make sure I'm ready for the grand reunion. I've been checking my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for a private number or an email from his personal assistant. I'm sure he's just busy with some international merger or a charity gala, and he wants to make sure he has enough time to dedicate to our conversation. He probably needs to compose himself after the shock of hearing from me, as I'm sure I'm still the benchmark for every woman he's met since. It's a lot of pressure to be someone's muse, but I've always handled it with a grace that most people can only dream of. I'm already planning what I'll wear to our first dinner, something that says I'm back without being too obvious. The silence is a bit annoying, but I've decided to interpret it as a sign of his intense focus on how to approach me. He knows I'm not a woman you just send a casual text to. I require a formal invitation and a sincere apology for his past lack of ambition. I'm willing to forgive him for everything, including making me wait in that lobby, because I know he was just trying to process his emotions. We were always meant to be a power couple, and the world is finally starting to align with that reality. I just need to be patient while he clears his schedule for the most important person in his life. I've started looking at luxury apartments near the headquarters because commuting from this dump is simply not an option once I'm employed. I deserve a view of the city that matches my internal horizon, and the kids need a yard that isn't shared with 3 other families. I can already see the headline in the social columns, "The Return of the Queen, Monica and Stephen Reunite." It has a certain ring to it, doesn't it? People will finally stop looking at me with pity and start looking at me with the envy I've earned. The children were crying again tonight, probably sensing the shift in our destiny and getting excited about the life that awaits them. I told them that soon we'll have a chef and a driver, and they'll never have to wear hand-me-downs from the thrift store again. They deserve the world, and I am the only one who can provide it for them by securing our place in Stephen's life. It's not about the money, really, it's about the status and the respect that comes with being associated with a winner. I've always been a winner, even when the score didn't reflect it, and now the numbers are finally going to catch up. I'll head back to the office tomorrow if I don't hear from him by noon, just to make sure the receptionist didn't accidentally lose my note. You can't trust people these days, especially when they're jealous of your natural advantages and your connection to the elite. I'll wear my red dress this time, the one that used to make Stephen stumble over his words whenever I walked by. He's a man, after all, and no amount of corporate success can change the basic biological response he has to my presence. I'm ready for my close-up, and I'm ready for my throne. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, "You really think a vision and being an intimate friend is going to land you a PR or consultant role at a multinational? You haven't worked in 5 years. The audacity of showing up in a 3-season-old coat and expecting a corner office is the funniest thing I've read all day." OP's reply, "I have a natural vision and an innate understanding of Stephen's brand that no degree can provide. I am worth more than 10 of those Ivy League drones he employs. My vision is exactly what he needs to stay relevant, and my coat is a classic silhouette that people with actual taste appreciate." Anonymous user 2 says, "That receptionist wasn't jealous, she was doing her job by keeping a delusional stranger away from the CEO. The staff isn't laughing because they're small-minded, they're laughing because you think a handwritten note about a university cafe is a professional credential." OP's reply, "They are absolutely jealous because they will never have the history or the raw magnetic connection that Stephen and I share. A note from me is a rare privilege, and if they were smart, they'd realize that being in the presence of someone with my history is the highlight of their dreary work week." Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and I finally managed to secure a meeting, though it wasn't exactly the warm, private reunion I had envisioned. Instead of being ushered into Stephen's mahogany-paneled inner sanctum, I was directed to a sterile, glass-walled conference room on a lower floor. Stephen wasn't even there. Instead, I was met by a woman from HR who looked like she had been carved out of a block of ice and dressed in a suit that cost more than my monthly rent. She didn't offer me coffee or even a smile, just sat there with my resume and that handwritten note I'd sent, looking at them like they were contaminated with some kind of infectious disease. It was incredibly demeaning to be forced to justify my existence to a subordinate who clearly had no idea who I was or what I meant to this company's founder. She started asking these ridiculous, pointed questions about my 5-year career gap and why I thought I was qualified for a senior management role without any recent experience. I tried to explain that I've been managing a household of 3 children, which requires more strategic planning and crisis management than any corporate project. I also made it very clear that Steven and I have a special connection that transcends traditional job requirements, but she just blinked at me with those cold, dead eyes. She didn't seem to understand that my presence alone would be an asset to the company's image, bringing a touch of class and history that they are clearly lacking. It's hard to stay professional when you're being interrogated by someone who is so obviously threatened by your natural elegance. The conversation took a sharp turn when she informed me that the CEO has a very strict policy regarding personal acquaintances from the past. Apparently, Steven has made it a rule not to hire anyone he knew before his success to avoid potential extortion or unnecessary emotional baggage. I was absolutely furious. The idea that I could ever be considered baggage or an extortionist is a direct assault on my character. He's clearly trying to punish me for being honest with him years ago, using his corporate rules to hide from the fact that he still has feelings for me. It's a cowardly way to handle a relationship, and it shows that despite all his billions, he's still that same insecure boy who couldn't handle a little constructive criticism. I told her that his policy was absurd and that I was an exception to every rule he had ever written, but she just pushed my resume back across the table. She had the nerve to suggest that I apply for an entry-level administrative position if I was truly desperate for work within the organization. I nearly choked on my indignation. The thought of me, Monica, answering phones and filing papers for people who should be bowing to me is absolutely laughable. I stood up and told her that she was making a grave mistake and that Steven would hear about this insulting treatment as soon as I got a hold of him. She just watched me walk out, her expression never changing, which honestly made me want to scream in frustration. I spent the bus ride home thinking about how much Steven has changed, and not for the better if he's surrounding himself with such robotic, joyless people. He's built this fortress around himself to keep the world out, but he doesn't realize that he's also keeping out the only person who truly knows him. He's using his power to play these petty games, probably hoping that I'll beg for his help so he can finally feel superior to me. It's a classic move for someone who started with nothing. They get a little taste of authority and suddenly they think they can rewrite history to suit their ego. He wants me to crawl, but he's forgotten that I am a woman who only walks on marble and red carpets. The kids were a nightmare when I got back, sense-checking my mood and acting out because they could feel my righteous anger. My oldest kept asking if we were moving to the big building yet, and I had to tell him that Mommy is still negotiating our terms. It's exhausting to have to maintain a front of perfection when everyone around me is trying to pull me down to their level. I'm currently sitting in my kitchen, which smells faintly of old grease and disappointment, trying to figure out my next move. I won't let some HR drone decide my fate, and I certainly won't let Steven hide behind his policies like a frightened child. I've decided that if I can't get to him through the front door, I'll have to find another way to remind him of what he's missing. I know his schedule must be public knowledge in some circles, or at least I can figure out his routine by observing the building's patterns. A man like that is a creature of habit, and I just need one moment of face-to-face contact to break through the walls he's built. Once he sees me, really sees me, all those stupid corporate policies will melt away in the heat of the moment. He's trying to punish me, but I know deep down it's just a cry for attention from a man who is still hopelessly in love. I'm also starting to suspect that the HR woman might be acting on her own, perhaps trying to protect Steven from a woman she sees as a rival. It would make sense. Why else would she be so dismissive of a candidate with such a clear and intimate connection to the CEO? She's probably in love with him herself and sees me as a threat to her own pathetic ambitions within the company. It's almost sad, really, the lengths some women will go to when they encounter someone of my caliber. I'll make sure to mention her unprofessional behavior to Steven when we finally have our dinner. She won't be in that office much longer. I've been looking at my bank balance, and it's a bit more dire than I'd like to admit, but I'm not worried because I know my ship is about to come in. I've always been lucky, or rather, I've always been favored by destiny, and this is just a temporary test of my resolve. I'll sell my last designer watch if I have to, just to keep up appearances for another week while I finalize my plan. It's a small price to pay for the lifestyle that awaits me once Steven admits he was wrong. I am the prize, and he is the one who has to win me over all over again. I spent the rest of the night practicing my speech for when I finally corner him, making sure it's the perfect blend of vulnerability and high-status grace. I'll tell him that I've grown, that I've learned to appreciate his drive, and that I'm ready to accept his devotion now. He'll be so relieved that he'll probably give me a sign-on bonus just for showing up. I can already feel the keys to the penthouse in my hand, and the sound of that HR woman's heels as she scurries out of the building for the last time. It's all going to happen exactly as I've envisioned it, because that's just how my life works. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, the CEO policy is the most polite way of saying, stay away from me, you're a liability. He literally created a rule to prevent people like you from extorting him. And you think he's punishing you? No, honey, he's protecting his peace from the woman who called him a loser. OP's reply, it's a cowardly rule designed by lawyers to prevent genuine human connection. If he were a real man with any backbone, he'd face me directly instead of hiding behind a skirt in HR. He's not protecting his peace, he's protecting himself from the fact that I still have power over him. Anonymous user 2 says, you told HR that being a mom is equivalent to senior management experience? I can almost hear the entire department laughing in the break room. The only special connection you have is a deleted contact from 2018 and a whole lot of delusion. OP's reply, you weren't there in the trenches of university life, he used to cry when I didn't text him back within 5 minutes. If you think managing 3 children and a household isn't high-level strategy, then you've clearly never had to maintain a brand while surrounded by chaos. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I finally took matters into my own hands because waiting for permission is for people who don't have my kind of destiny. I realized that Steven was never going to come to me while he was surrounded by his gatekeepers, so I decided to meet him on neutral ground. I spent 3 days staked out near the parking garage entrance of his skyscraper, blending in as much as I could while still looking like someone who belonged there. It was exhausting and honestly quite beneath me to be standing on a sidewalk for hours, but I knew it would be worth it for the look on his face. I saw several high-end cars pull out, but none of them were him until finally, a sleek, charcoal gray sedan that cost more than a small mansion glided toward the exit. I didn't even think, I just stepped out into the middle of the private drive, forcing the car to screech to a halt just inches from my knees. The security guard at the gate started yelling, but I ignored him, keeping my eyes fixed on the tinted window as it slowly slid down. And there he was, Steven, looking impeccably sharp in a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin, his eyes shielded by expensive sunglasses. For a split second, the air between us felt exactly like it did 6 years ago, and I could see the old Steven peering through the CEO mask. I didn't wait for him to speak, I launched into my rehearsed speech about how hard things have been and how I've realized I made a mistake being so hard on him in the past. I talked about the kids, about how they need a father figure and how I've finally matured enough to see the value in what he was offering all those years ago. I even managed to squeeze out a few tears, which I thought was a very nice touch of vulnerability that would surely melt his cold heart. He just sat there, one hand on the steering wheel, watching me with an expression that I can only describe as bored. He didn't offer a hand, he didn't offer a tissue, and he certainly didn't offer me a job or a place in his life. I felt a flicker of annoyance, but I pushed it down, telling him that I was ready to give him another chance to prove his love for me. Then, he did something that was so incredibly toxic and obsessed that I'm still shaking from the sheer malice of it. He pulled out a sleek, latest model phone and tapped a few buttons, and suddenly, my own voice started playing through the car's high-end speakers. It was a voice note I'd sent him 6 years ago, and in it, I was laughing hysterically with some of my old friends, calling him a pathetic, delusional loser. I heard myself saying that he would never amount to anything more than a janitor, and that I'd rather be single forever than be seen in public with someone so mediocre. It was a private joke, something said in the heat of a fun night, and the fact that he'd kept it for 6 years is frankly disturbing. I tried to explain that I was just young and influenced by the wrong people back then, but he didn't even let me finish my sentence. He looked at me with this chillingly calm smile and said, I'm not a crumb collector anymore, Monica. And ironically, you've come here looking for exactly that, the crumbs of my success. I was stunned into silence, my mouth hanging open as he rolled the window back up with a soft, mechanical whir. He didn't even look back as he drove away, leaving me standing in the middle of the exhaust fumes and the mocking gaze of the security guard. It was the most ungrateful, cruel reaction I could have possibly imagined after I'd humbled myself to even speak to him. The security guard then had the audacity to tell me I had to leave or he'd call the police for harassment. I told him I was a personal guest of the owner, but he just pointed to the street and said he'd been given specific instructions about people like me. I had to walk 3 blocks to the bus stop because my heels were killing me, and the entire way, I felt like everyone was looking at me and laughing. It's absolutely insane that a man would hold on to a tiny, insignificant joke for over half a decade just to use it against a woman in her time of need. It shows a level of pettiness that is completely inconsistent with someone of his supposed status. When I got home, I felt physically ill from the injustice of it all, and the neighbor had the nerve to ask me if I'd landed the big fish yet. I told her to mind her own business and that I was dealing with a very sensitive corporate matter that she couldn't possibly understand. I spent the night crying, not because I was sad about Steven, but because I was frustrated that the world is so full of people who want to see me fail. My children were acting up again, and I just couldn't deal with them, so I locked myself in the bathroom with a glass of cheap wine. I am a victim of a man's long-term grudge, and it's honestly one of the most toxic things I've ever experienced. I'm still convinced that he's doing this because he's still obsessed with me and he wants to see me suffer, so I'll eventually break down and beg for his mercy. It's a power play, a way for him to feel like he's finally won the battle we started in the library. But he's forgotten that I am the one who gave him the drive to succeed in the first place. Without my rejection, he'd still be sipping black coffee in a stained t-shirt. He should be thanking me, not playing old recordings like some kind of basement-dwelling creep. It's incredibly disappointing to see that money doesn't actually buy class or the ability to forgive and move on. I've been thinking about that voice note, and I'm honestly offended that he would record me without my permission in the first place. It's a violation of my privacy, and if I had the money for a lawyer, I'd probably sue him for emotional distress and illegal recording. He thinks he's so smart, but he's just a bully with a nice car and a big building to hide in. I deserve so much better than to be treated like a common stalker just because I wanted to offer a former friend some closure and a chance at a real relationship. The world has truly gone mad when a woman of my quality is treated like a criminal for having an opinion. I'm not giving up yet, because I know that Steven is just waiting for me to make a bigger gesture to prove I'm serious. He's testing my loyalty, trying to see if I'll stick around even when he's being a difficult, billionaire brat. I'll figure out where he lives. It can't be that hard to find a man of his prominence, and I'll show up at his house where he doesn't have his security guards to protect his ego. We need a real, private conversation without the interference of his corporate toys and his bitter memories. I am Monica, and I always get what I want in the end, even if I have to endure a few crumbs along the way. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, he played the voice note. That is the ultimate "this you" moment of the century. He literally kept the receipts for 6 years just for this exact day. You didn't humble yourself, you got caught in your own trap, and it was glorious to read. OP's reply, keeping a recording for 6 years is the definition of obsessed and toxic behavior. A normal, healthy person would have deleted it and moved on. He's clearly mentally unstable if he's using a private joke from years ago to justify being heartless to a mother of 3. Anonymous user 2 says, you blocked his car in a private garage and you're surprised he didn't take you back? You're the one collecting crumbs now, literally begging for a job from a man you said would never be more than a janitor. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. OP's reply, I have children to feed and a status to maintain, and he's being incredibly petty over a minor comment from our youth. I am the one who gave him his ambition, and the fact that he's using his success to humiliate me is a sign that he's never truly evolved past being that mediocre boy. Update 4. It's been 1 month since my last update, and I wish I could say that things have improved, but the fallout has been absolute and entirely unfair. Not only did Steven refuse to hire me, but it seems he's gone out of his way to ensure that I am persona non grata in this entire city's professional circles. I tried applying to 3 other major firms, and during the interviews, I was met with these cold, knowing looks that I didn't understand at first. Finally, a hiring manager at a boutique agency asked me point blank if I was the woman from the Stephen Miller incident. I was stunned, but it turns out that his security team filed an official report for harassment after I blocked his car, and apparently, it's become a topic of conversation in the local business community. My reputation, which I've worked so hard to maintain despite my circumstances, has been completely dragged through the mud by a man I once called a friend. I am officially blacklisted from the only circles that could have saved me from this mediocrity, and all because I tried to reconnect with someone I thought had a soul. My old friends from university, the ones who used to laugh with me and agree that Steven was beneath us, won't even take my calls now. I saw one of them at a cafe last week, and she literally turned her head and walked the other way when she saw me coming. It's disgusting how quickly people will abandon you the moment you're no longer associated with the winner of the story. They've all seen the CEO version of him, and suddenly they've forgotten all the times we mocked his cheap shoes and his boring personality. It's pure hypocrisy. They're all just as classist as I am, but they're better at hiding it behind their fake smiles and their newfound respect for his success. I am the only one who stayed true to my standards, and I'm being punished for it while he gets to be the hero of the city. I've had to take a job at a local grocery store just to keep the lights on, wearing a polyester uniform that makes my skin crawl every time I put it on. It's the ultimate humiliation for a woman of my standing to be scanning items for people who probably don't even have a college degree. The children are constantly asking why we can't go to the big building, or why we're eating generic brand cereal instead of the organic stuff we used to have. It breaks my heart to see them suffer because of a man's inability to let go of a few harsh words from the past. I've had to sell almost everything of value I owned, including the designer heels I wore to that last confrontation, just to pay the back rent on this cramped apartment. Every day I wake up and see that skyscraper on the horizon, and it feels like a giant, glass middle finger pointed directly at my life. I am trapped in a reality that I never signed up for, and there is no one left to help me escape. I've realized that my arrogance didn't just lose me a friend, it burned the only bridge I had left to the life I actually deserve. I spent so much time looking down on Steven that I didn't notice he was the only person who truly saw my potential, even if it was just as a muse for his own ambition. I was so focused on the status of the moment that I completely missed the trajectory of the future, and now I'm the one picking up the pieces of a shattered dream. It's a bitter, uncomfortable realization that I am the architect of my own downfall, and that no amount of a vision can fix the fact that I pushed away the only person who could have actually given me the throne I wanted. I saw a photo of him in the news yesterday, attending a gala with a woman who looked like she'd never had a struggle in her life. She was wearing a dress that I know costs more than my entire existence, and she was smiling at him with this look of genuine admiration that I never gave him. It killed me to see it, to see someone else occupying the space that I've spent the last month convinced was mine by right. I am sitting here in my kitchen, looking at a pile of unpaid bills and a uniform that smells like floor cleaner, wondering how I could have been so blind. I thought I was the one holding all the cards, but it turns out I wasn't even at the table. There's no redemption coming for me, no miracle call from an old associate, and certainly no apology from Steven. I am just another single mother struggling to get by in a city that has no room for fallen queens who don't know how to keep their mouths shut. I've lost my house, my status, and my pride, and I'm left with nothing but the echoes of my own voice on a recording I wish I'd never made. It's hard to even look at my children sometimes because I see my own features in them, the same eyes that used to look at the world with such disdain, now looking at a future that is incredibly small and gray. I tried to call Steven one last time from a burner phone, just to tell him I was sorry, but the number I had was already disconnected or changed. He's completely erased me from his world, as if I were nothing more than a minor annoyance that he's finally swatted away. I'm just a ghost in his machine now, a cautionary tale he probably tells his new billionaire friends over expensive scotch. The irony is that I'm now the crumb collector, scavenging for any bit of hope or opportunity in a city that has closed its doors to me. I'm officially a nobody, and the weight of that realization is heavier than any debt I've ever carried. I have to go to work in an hour, to stand behind a register and smile at people I used to think were beneath me. It's my new reality, and I have to find a way to survive it for the sake of the kids, even if every second of it feels like a slow death. I keep thinking about that library, about the look on Steven's face when I told him he wasn't enough, and I wish I could go back and just stay silent. But you can't undo the damage once the bridge is already in ashes, and you can't walk across a gap that you insisted on creating. I am alone, I am broke, and for the first time in my life, I have absolutely nothing to say. My story is over, at least the version where I'm the winner, and all that's left is this uncomfortable, bitter regret that tastes worse than anything I've ever eaten. I thought I was too good for him, too good for the struggle, and too good for the process of building something real. Now I'm just a woman in a polyester shirt, watching the world go by from the bottom of the ladder I refuse to climb. I hope he's happy with his billions and his perfect life, because I'm certainly living with the consequences of mine. It turns out that when you treat people like scraps, you eventually find yourself looking for a meal in the trash.